More fallout from the Trump tariffs as even more import taxes are set to take effect later this week. The president says he's ready to negotiate with affected countries, and today a top ally went to Washington to try to work out a deal. This as people protest the president's new policies and business leaders increasingly warn of a potential recession. NBC's Vaughn Hilliard has more from the White House.
Another roller coaster day on Wall Street as investors react to President Trump's new taxes on imported goods.
It's the only chance we're going to have to reset the table on trade.
The president essentially telling spooked investors not to panic. In a post on Truth Social, Mr. Trump says dozens of countries have called to negotiate lower tariffs.
More fallout from Trump's tariffs is unfolding. Automaker Stellantis is hitting the brakes on production at some of its assembly lines. Around 900 workers are being temporarily laid off.
With Trump announcing new tariffs this week, workers at carmaker Stellantis were worrying about their futures. The company announced Thursday it is temporarily laying off 900 workers at 5 U.S. plants and halting production at 1 each in Mexico and Canada. Denny Butler is vice president of the United Auto Workers Local 685, representing Stellantis workers in Indiana.
We've got a group of 470-some people out there that are starting to worry. They don't know if they need to go find another job or not. That's the frustrating part, because it's our job to be able to help and reach out and guide those people and give them an honest opinion of what they need to do, and we can't. That's the frustrating part.
Trump's tariffs, the so-called genius economic move, have turned out to be a wrecking ball for the American auto industry. Trump believed that by slapping a 25% tariff on imported parts and vehicles, he could somehow make America great again. But instead of greatness, he's pushing the U.S. car industry toward a meltdown. Stellantis, the parent company behind Jeep, Dodge, Chrysler, and Ram, is now reeling from the consequences. The company recently revealed 7,000 job cuts and announced multiple factory shutdowns. Remember the promise of jobs? What we're seeing is the opposite, an unemployment surge. One devastated Stellantis worker put it simply, "Honestly, it's crushing. My aunt's worked here for years. She shouldn't be on the chopping block." Trump once vowed to be the job creator-in-chief. Instead, his decisions have turned workers' hopes into pink slips. This whole strategy? It's indefensible. A bad joke with tragic consequences. Canada and Mexico weren't about to stay silent. They mocked Trump's tariffs as an economic comedy and cheered as the United States shot itself in the foot. Meanwhile, Europe and China are just standing by, watching America unravel. Ironically, the United States is now dealing with the same supply chain headaches it used to accuse others of causing. Worse still, international media are calling this America's economic suicide. Trump's blind faith in protectionism has weakened U.S. industry and stripped brands like Jeep and Ram of their competitive edge. Forecasts now suggest car sales in North America could drop by over 2 million units annually. Jeep Compass, once a favorite, is facing massive price hikes. The beloved Ram 1500, formerly a go-to for working-class Americans, might soon surpass $50,000. A working man's truck turned millionaire's toy. All this thanks to Trump's tariffs, which have shattered supply chains. Take Windsor, Canada, home to Chrysler production, where 4,500 people lost their jobs. Toluca, Mexico, where Jeep and Dodge are assembled, another 2,500 gone. And back in the U.S., 900 workers furloughed within 24 hours of the tariff announcement. Just like that, Stellantis plants were frozen. Yet Trump still insists this policy will somehow restore American greatness. In reality, it's gutting one of America's proudest industries. Production costs are through the roof. Experts estimate the U.S. auto industry will take a $107.7 billion hit, with Stellantis alone facing losses around $41.9 billion. Car prices are set to rise by $2,000 to $4,000 per vehicle. The Jeep Compass could reach $30,000. The Ram 1500, over $50,000. These vehicles once represented freedom and grit. Now they're becoming luxury badges for the elite. Trump's tariff plan is like a wrecking ball to the middle class. And it doesn't stop with Stellantis. John Deere, a pillar of U.S. agriculture, is shifting production from Iowa to Mexico, triggering hundreds of layoffs. A brand that once symbolized American-made is now fleeing to cut costs. Trump's response? Threats of 200% tariffs on imports from companies like Deere and Ford.
You know the slogan, nothing runs like a deer? Well, now John Deere's running all the way to Mexico, slashing more than 600 jobs in Illinois and Iowa in the process. This is just recently. The company citing rising manufacturing costs as one of the reasons for the move.
Our next guest says the loss of Deere will be devastating to his community. Joining
us now, a former John Deere employee who had to take early retirement, Chris Larson. Chris, good to see you. You're from Ottumwa, Iowa, and I've driven through that small community, and it's just to imagine what it's going through with the loss of those jobs. It just must be devastating. What is the town going to do? And you are in a union. You were fired and got your job back about a year ago because of the union.
Yes, that's correct. First of all, thank you for having me on, Deegan and Sean. I appreciate the opportunity. Look, there's going to be a significant impact to these small towns here around Iowa that have manufacturing facilities for John Deere here. Already this year they've laid almost off 1,000 workers. More cuts are expected at the end of July.
But these threats didn't bring businesses back. Instead, prices soared for cars, appliances, even groceries. Global supply chains began fracturing. U.S. factories ran out of parts and companies started making exit plans. John Deere expanded to Brazil and India. Ford poured $1 billion into EV production in Mexico and Vietnam. General Motors and Caterpillar followed, moving offshore to survive. Why? Because staying in America had become too expensive. These aren't just corporate decisions, they're economic earthquakes. Workers in the Midwest are being gutted. Once proud manufacturing towns are turning into ghost towns. Auto shops, part suppliers, small businesses, all collapsing from the ripple effect. The American dream Trump promised to revive? It's turning into dust. Blue-collar workers now face mass layoffs and limited options. Their future, once steady and proud, now looks uncertain and bleak. Trump's grand plan to reignite U.S. manufacturing has done the opposite. Instead of bringing jobs back, companies are leaving. His policies offered patriotic promises, but delivered economic pain. Then came Canada's counterstrike. In March 2025, Trump imposed a 25% tariff on Canadian-made vehicles. The goal? Protect U.S. automakers and shrink the trade deficit. The result? Chaos. Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney didn't hold back. He hit back with tariffs on critical EV parts, minerals like lithium and nickel, and essential components needed by Tesla and Ford. The result? U.S. factories halted. Dealers couldn't meet demand. Wall Street went into panic mode. Within 1 week, $50 billion was wiped from the U.S. auto sector. Car prices skyrocketed, showrooms were empty, consumers were left scrambling. Analysts now warn that 2025 could see U.S. auto sales fall by 700,000 units, with car prices rising by nearly $6,000 on average. S&P Global predicts daily production losses of up to 20,000 vehicles in North America. That's a devastating blow. Tesla, heavily reliant on Canadian minerals, saw major delays. What used to be a 2-week delivery stretched to 2 months. With over 6 million units planned for 2025, production stalls sent Tesla stock plummeting. UBS and Mizuho downgraded their stock forecasts, slashing delivery expectations by up to 11%. Ford also suffered. With over a quarter of its output in Michigan and Kentucky disrupted, it lost revenue and racked up added costs. American consumers? They're paying the price, literally.
Ford lost billions of dollars on electric vehicles in 2024, and the company now says it expects to do the same this year. This week, the automaker's EV business reported a $5.1 billion loss in 2024, an increase from the $4.7 billion deficit it recorded the year prior. Now in 2025, Ford is anticipating its annual EV losses will balloon even further, reaching $5.5 billion.
We expect a loss of $5 billion to $5.5 billion for Ford Model E, holding losses stable year over year, while continued industry pricing pressure remains.
But despite these challenges with electric vehicle profitability, The company actually exceeded Wall Street expectations with its 2024 full-year earnings. This was thanks to the money made by Ford's gasoline-powered models, which helped the automaker post a full-year net income of $5.9 billion and adjusted earnings totaling $10.2 billion. Meanwhile, the 2025 revenue forecast for the automaker's EV business do not factor in potential changes in U.S. government policy. This includes potential cost increases linked to President Donald Trump's proposed 25% tariffs on imports from Mexico and Canada, both of which Ford sources EV components from. The automaker also assembles some of its electric models in Mexico for export to the U.S. and is investing heavily in an EV manufacturing facility in Canada.
A 15% spike in new car prices means millions can no longer afford a vehicle. Used cars are now worth more than new ones, simply because they're available. The entire market is flipped. This isn't just about car companies, this is about livelihoods. Over 50,000 American workers have lost their jobs in just 1 month since Canada's retaliation. In states like Ohio, Michigan, and Kentucky, where auto jobs are life, communities are collapsing. Trump's tariffs were supposed to reignite a manufacturing boom. What they sparked instead was a slow, painful unraveling of America's industrial core. It's not just about retaliation anymore. There's growing anxiety among American workers and consumers. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has taken a bold and strategic approach, aiming to boost Canada's global standing. Rather than going head-to-head with the U.S., Carney adopted a clever tactic: increase border checks, slow down shipments, and subtly choke key supply chains. The result? Tremendous pressure on the U.S. economy, without launching a full-blown sanctions war. This strategy isn't just effective, it's smart PR. It's helping Canada present itself as a champion of fair trade while catching the eye of global investors. Countries in Europe and Asia, once tightly linked to the U.S. economy, are now showing interest in partnering with Canada and Mexico instead. Automakers are starting to pay attention too. If investment flows start favoring Canada and Mexico over the U.S., America could quickly lose its grip on global auto industry leadership. Meanwhile, there's a massive global shift in play. Countries like China and those in Europe are seizing the moment to carve out a bigger piece of the North American auto market. With access to Canada's vital minerals, China has ramped up its investments in electric vehicle, EV, production. Chinese EV factories based in Mexico are gearing up to enter the United States market, completely bypassing tariffs and posing a serious threat to American auto dominance. Europe is following suit. Major car manufacturers that once heavily invested in the United States are now redirecting funds to Canada and Mexico, looking for more stable partners. This growing competition means U.S. giants like Tesla, Ford, and GM will have to radically rethink their production strategies just to keep up. GM's response? It dropped a bombshell. The company announced it would slash 14,000 jobs and shutter 5 factories.
On your block in Macomb County, where General Motors announced it will lay off 1,000 white-collar employees. This is the second layoff announced in as many months. CBS News Detroit's Gino Vici joins us from the GM Tech Center with more on those cuts, as well as the state of the auto industry as a whole as we gear up for a Trump presidency.
Yes, the recent layoffs announced here at General Motors, not a good sign for the company, but it could also be a sign of the many challenges the auto industry is facing, like the EV dilemma, which hasn't worked out so well for Stellantis, Ford Motor Company, or General Motors. Auto industry experts say there is another looming issue on the horizon, and it can have far-reaching effects in the auto industry, and is coming under a Trump administration, and that is tariffs.
GM has had quite a shift in their strategy lately. As you know, they were all in on EVs.
Jan Griffiths with Gravitas Detroit says the recent layoffs at General Motors is perhaps a warning sign for the auto industry moving forward.
And when the EV demand didn't come through as we all expected, they had to change their strategy, and now they're looking at right-sizing their operations.
Griffiths says GM is likely not the only automaker that will be looking to right-size or shift their operations away from focusing so heavily on EVs.
Now, Stellantis is in a much worse situation.
Stellantis stock is down 40% in the U.S. and sales dropped 20% this quarter. And there is also another looming issue that could have a ripple effect in the automotive industry: Trump-era tariffs on foreign vehicles and parts from China.
And that too will have a ripple effect through the automotive supply chain.
If parts are taxed with tariffs, the cost to produce will rise, and in theory could lead to more layoffs. However, Griffiths believes auto executives have already been preparing for this to happen.
So they're going to be ready. They've started nearshoring or bringing their supply chains back to the U.S. or closer to the U.S.
In Warren, Gino Vici, CBS News, Detroit.
That's not a ripple, it's a tidal wave. Yet Trump is still pushing his dream of a 200% tariff, thinking it'll revive American car manufacturing. Newsflash: GM just gave his America First mantra the middle finger. Instead of clinging to Trump's isolationist strategy, GM pivoted, big time, toward globalization and clean energy. They've poured over $20 billion into EV research and development. While Trump tweets about bringing jobs back, GM is building the future. So who's actually winning here? Trump's knee-jerk reaction was a 200% tariff, probably hoping it'd scare companies into staying. Instead, it felt like punching a brick wall. Car stocks tanked, investors panicked. GM's stock initially dipped 3% but bounced right back, thanks to robust international revenue. In 2024 alone, GM pulled in more than $32 billion globally. While Trump shouted from his podium, GM calmly executed a strategy years in the making. They knew relying solely on U.S. production was a recipe for disaster. Let's run the numbers. In 2024, over 40% of GM's output came from factories outside the U.S. They dropped $1 billion expanding in China and India, places where Trump's tariffs have zero reach.
Yesterday, one of the goals that you guys stated emphatically was you will be the market leader in EVs. But right now, Tesla is at 63% market share. By 2025, some believe that you can catch Tesla. You guys are at, 9-10% right now in the U.S. Do you think that you can catch Tesla by 2025?
Absolutely, Phil. When we look at the portfolio we have, not only the Hummer and the Lyriq, but Mark Royce talked about that we're going to have a Equinox-like size product that's going to be at around $30,000. We have the Silverado E coming, a GMC product after that. And again, all the other products that we haven't announced yet, I am very comfortable because when people get into these vehicles, they are just wowed. So we will be rolling them out, and we're going to just keep working until we have #1 market share in EVs.
Meanwhile, Trump keeps blaming everyone else, but GM, they're playing the long game and winning. If Trump ever wrote a book called How to Globalize, it would probably flop hard. The reality is this: the American auto industry is shrinking. Forecasts suggest that 2 million cars won't be sold in 2025. Automakers like Hyundai, Toyota, and Nissan are already moving more than half their production abroad just to avoid tariffs.
GM making a big investment in Mexico to produce EVs. Our Phil LeBeau has the details. Hey, Phil.
Hey, Mike, it's a $1 billion investment that General Motors will be making in one of its plants down there. This is the plant that currently builds the Blazer as well as the Equinox. Unclear what vehicles will be built down there, but this $1 billion investment there means GM now will have 5 plants in North America that they are converting either partially or fully into the to make electric vehicles. This does not sit well at the UAW. In fact, it blasted General Motors once the news came out yesterday. In a statement, the UAW says, at a time when General Motors is asking for a significant investment by the U.S. government in subsidizing electric vehicles, this is a slap in the face for not only UAW members and their families, but also for U.S. taxpayers and the American workforce. Keep in mind, GM is doing what all automakers are doing: heavy investments in EVs in anticipation of a surge in demand. Look at it, it's supposed to be up to 25 million in annual sales for the auto industry worldwide by 2030.
GM, meanwhile, is investing $5 billion in new EV factories in Mexico. While Trump clings to an outdated America First slogan, GM has already mapped out the road ahead. Does Trump even realize his policies are flying straight into a headwind? While GM is surging forward in the EV space, China is moving in aggressively. The country is ramping up investment in EV technology and battery production. Trump, on the other hand, is still holding tight to his trade war playbook, probably misplaced under a pile of old campaign slogans. Where it once relied heavily on China, Apple is now pivoting hard toward India, a country offering lower labor costs and friendlier trade terms. As of April 2025, the U.S. has slammed a 125% tariff on Chinese-made electronics, up from the previous 54%. That hike has made it nearly impossible for Chinese products to compete in the American market. Apple, like many others, had no choice but to adapt fast or be crushed by soaring costs. India is stepping up to fill the gap, and Apple's massive move is only the beginning. The ripple effects of these trade policies are changing how the entire tech world operates, and fast. For more insights on the happenings in the political world and globally, don't forget to share, like, and subscribe to our channel.